The people who call you worthless are often the first to fear what your kindness might one day awaken. Evelyn Carter pulled her faded grey cloak tighter around her shoulders as the cold evening wind swept through the towering pines surrounding Silver Hollow Pack. Autumn leaves danced across the worn stone path beneath her boots, their dry whispers nearly drowning out the laughter echoing from the brightly lit gathering hall behind her. Tonight was supposed to be the harvest moon celebration, the one night every unmated wolf looked toward with hope. Instead, it had become another reminder that Evelyn never truly belonged. At 22, she had long accepted the way others looked through her, as though she were little more than another shadow stretching across the forest floor. She was an omega whose gentle gifts were dismissed as weakness, in a world that admired strength above all else. While other wolves trained to fight, compete, and prove themselves before their pack, Evelyn spent her days tending injured birds, calming frightened horses, and quietly helping elderly neighbors, without expecting anything in return. No one applauded those things. No one remembered them, either. Inside the great hall, music floated through the open doors, along with bursts of cheerful conversation. Golden lanterns bathed polished wooden beams in warm light, while laughter spilled freely into the cool night air. Evelyn remained outside, unnoticed except by those who found amusement in reminding her exactly where she belonged. "There she is," one young beater muttered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Still pretending kindness counts for something," another chuckled. "Maybe she'll rescue another lost squirrel tonight. That seems more her speed." A few nearby wolves laughed, and Evelyn lowered her eyes, choosing silence instead of another pointless argument. Experience had taught her that defending herself only encouraged more ridicule. She quietly stepped away from the entrance, hoping to disappear before anyone else decided she should become the evening's entertainment. As she crossed the courtyard, an older woman carrying a basket stumbled on the uneven stone walkway. Apples scattered across the ground, rolling between boots and wagon wheels. Without hesitation, Evelyn hurried over and knelt beside her. "Let me help," she said softly. Together, they gathered every apple, while dozens of guests walked past without slowing down. The elderly woman smiled with grateful eyes. "You always notice the things everyone else ignores." Evelyn returned a small smile, but said nothing. She had heard similar words before, usually from those who had little power to change anything. When the last apple was safely returned to the basket, the woman gently squeezed Evelyn's hand, before disappearing into the crowd. Moments later, a sharp voice interrupted the quiet. "Helping old ladies won't earn you respect." Pack Alpha Dominic stood beneath the hall's entrance, surrounded by several high-ranking wolves. His expression carried neither anger nor kindness, only cold disappointment. "You were invited to celebrate. Instead, you remind everyone why omegas like you should stay in the background." Evelyn swallowed the sting in her throat. "I only wanted to help." "Exactly," Dominic replied. "That is all you ever do. Help. Never lead. Never inspire. Never matter." The words landed heavier than the cold air surrounding her. Around them, conversations resumed, as though nothing unusual had happened. No one defended her. No one objected. They simply accepted his judgment as truth. Evelyn looked once toward the bright hall, filled with music, warmth, and belonging, before quietly turning away. Beyond the village, the ancient forest stretched beneath the rising moon, silent and endless. She drew a slow breath, and followed the narrow trail disappearing between towering pines, leaving behind every voice that had ever told her she would never be enough. Deep within the darkness ahead, hidden beneath layers of fallen leaves, and untouched by anyone's eyes, something small let out the faintest cry, too weak for ordinary ears to notice, but somehow impossible for Evelyn's gentle heart to ignore. The forest welcomed Evelyn Carter with a silence that felt kinder than the voices she had left behind. Moonlight filtered through towering pine branches, painting silver ribbons across the narrow trail, as a cool breeze carried the rich scent of cedar, damp earth, and distant rain. She walked without knowing where she intended to go. The deeper she wandered into the ancient woods, the lighter her chest became, as though every step placed another layer of peaceful distance between herself and the judgment she had carried for years. Somewhere overhead, an owl called softly, answered by the rustling of leaves dancing high above. Then she heard it. It was so faint, she almost believed it belonged to the wind. A tiny, trembling whimper drifted through the darkness, before disappearing again. Evelyn stopped immediately. She closed her eyes and listened. Nothing. Only the whisper of branches swaying together. She shook her head gently, and continued walking. After only a few more steps, the sound returned. This time, it was followed by a fragile little cry that carried a fear no ordinary animal should have known. Evelyn turned toward the dense underbrush without hesitation. Most wolves would have ignored it, assuming nature would take its course. But something about that tiny voice tugged at her heart with quiet insistence. She carefully pushed aside thick ferns and low branches, following the sound deeper into a grove untouched by the nearby pack. Fallen leaves covered the forest floor in shades of amber and crimson, making every careful step almost silent. Again, the cry came, weaker now. She knelt beside a cluster of moss-covered stones, and noticed a narrow hollow hidden beneath tangled roots from an old oak tree. At first, she saw nothing except scattered leaves. Then, two brilliant golden eyes blinked open from the shadows. A tiny wolf pup lay curled inside the shallow shelter, its snowy white fur stained with mud and scattered pine needles. One small paw appeared trapped beneath a twisted branch that had fallen during an earlier storm. The little creature did not growl or retreat. Instead, it looked directly at Evelyn with exhausted trust, as though it had been waiting only for her. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "How long have you been here all alone?" She slowly reached out one open hand, giving the frightened pup every opportunity to pull away. Instead, its tiny nose brushed against her fingertips, before releasing the softest sigh she had ever heard. Evelyn smiled, through eyes beginning to glisten. With careful movements, she lifted the branch just enough to free the little paw. The pup whimpered, but did not struggle. Once it was free, it tried to stand. Its legs trembled beneath its small body, before it nearly collapsed again. Without thinking twice, Evelyn slipped off her cloak, and gently wrapped the shivering bundle inside its warm folds. The pup rested its head against her arm almost immediately, its breathing slow and uneven, but peaceful. As she adjusted the blanket around it, something unusual caught her attention. Around the tiny wolf's neck rested a slender silver chain, holding an intricately carved moonstone unlike anything she had ever seen. Delicate symbols shimmered faintly across its polished surface whenever the moonlight touched it, then disappeared just as quickly. "Who do you belong to?" she wondered quietly. The pup lifted its head for a brief moment, looking beyond the trees, as though listening for someone impossibly far away. Then it tucked itself closer against Evelyn's heartbeat. She looked around the silent forest once more. No voices called out. No footprints disturbed the damp ground nearby. Whoever had lost this tiny wolf was nowhere in sight. Evelyn drew a slow breath, and gently cradled the little creature against her chest. "You are not spending another minute out here alone," she promised softly. As she turned toward the trail leading back through the forest, neither she nor the sleeping pup noticed a pair of enormous paw prints pressed deep into the damp earth several yards away, fresh enough that the rain had not yet touched them. The tiny wolf pup remained peacefully asleep against Evelyn Carter's chest, as she followed the winding trail through the moonlit forest. Every few minutes, she glanced down to make sure the little creature was still breathing comfortably beneath the warmth of her grey cloak. Its ears twitched occasionally, and once its small nose nudged gently against her hand before settling again. A quiet smile touched Evelyn's face. For the first time that evening, the loneliness weighing on her heart seemed a little lighter. She had only walked another half-mile, when the peaceful silence changed. Birds resting high in the trees suddenly burst into flight. Somewhere ahead, hurried footsteps crunched across fallen leaves, followed by distant voices calling to one another. Evelyn instinctively stopped behind the broad trunk of an ancient pine. She held her breath and listened. "Search every trail," a man's voice ordered from somewhere beyond the trees. "The young wolf cannot have gone far." Another answered, "The tracks disappear near the eastern ridge." "We split into pairs." Evelyn frowned. They sounded organized, disciplined, unlike ordinary hunters from Silver Hollow Pack. She carefully stepped farther into the shadows, hoping they would pass without noticing her. The tiny pup stirred inside her cloak. Its golden eyes slowly opened, blinking up at her with surprising awareness. Then, almost as if it understood the danger, it became perfectly still. Evelyn gently stroked the soft fur between its ears. "Do not worry," she whispered. "I will not let anyone frighten you." A sudden rustle came from the bushes behind her. 3 men emerged, wearing dark traveling cloaks marked with unfamiliar silver wolf emblems stitched onto their shoulders. Their clothing was clean despite the long journey, and each carried a polished lantern instead of the rough hunting equipment local packs usually used. One of them noticed movement near Evelyn, and raised his lantern. "Someone is there." Evelyn stepped into the pale light before they could mistake her for a threat. "Good evening," she said calmly. "I did not realize anyone else was in the forest." The oldest of the 3 studied her carefully. His sharp grey eyes immediately drifted toward the bundle she carried. "You are from Silver Hollow?" he asked. "Yes. Have you seen a young white wolf wandering alone tonight?" Evelyn hesitated. She looked down at the tiny face peeking from beneath her cloak. The pup watched the strangers without making a sound, but its body trembled ever so slightly. Something inside Evelyn tightened. She had spent her whole life recognizing fear in abandoned animals. She knew that look. "I found an injured little one," she admitted honestly. "It was trapped beneath a fallen branch." The men exchanged quick glances. Relief briefly crossed one face, before another quietly shook his head, almost warning him to remain silent. The older man stepped closer, his expression courteous but strangely urgent. "You should hand the animal over to us. We will take responsibility from here." Evelyn did not move. "Are you its family?" None of them answered immediately. Instead, the oldest replied carefully, "It belongs somewhere very important." The answer felt strangely incomplete. Evelyn looked back down at the pup. Rather than reaching toward the strangers, the tiny wolf pressed itself closer against her, hiding its face beneath the edge of her cloak. She could actually feel its heartbeat quicken. "It does not seem to know you," she said quietly. "Or perhaps it simply feels safer with you, for the moment," another traveler offered with an uneasy smile. Before Evelyn could respond, a distant horn echoed through the forest, long and clear, followed by another from much farther away. The 3 men instantly straightened. "They have arrived," one whispered. The oldest looked toward the sound with visible concern, before turning back to Evelyn. "Miss, whatever happens next, stay exactly where you are." Confusion filled her eyes, as a powerful wind suddenly swept through the towering pines, carrying with it an unmistakable presence that seemed to make the entire forest hold its breath. The forest fell completely silent after the echo of the distant horn faded into the night. Even the wind seemed to pause among the towering pines, as though every living creature sensed that something extraordinary was approaching. Evelyn Carter instinctively tightened her arms around the tiny wolf pup. The little creature remained hidden beneath her grey cloak, its heartbeat quick but steady against her own. The 3 mysterious travelers stood motionless, their expressions shifting from determination to unmistakable respect. Whatever they had been searching for was clearly far more important than Evelyn could imagine. Before anyone spoke again, the pup suddenly lifted its small head. Its bright golden eyes fixed on Evelyn's face with unusual intensity. A soft whimper escaped its throat, before it gently pressed one tiny paw against her hand. The touch was warm, almost impossibly warm. Evelyn smiled softly, and covered the delicate paw with her fingers. "You are safe," she whispered. "No matter who is looking for you, I will not leave you frightened." The moment her skin touched the pup's paw, something remarkable happened. A faint silver glow appeared between their hands, so gentle that it almost resembled moonlight reflected across calm water. Evelyn blinked in surprise. She had spent her entire life comforting injured animals, yet she had never witnessed anything like this before. The glow spread slowly through the tiny wolf's body, flowing like liquid light beneath its snowy white fur. The pup released a peaceful sigh, and the trembling that had weakened its small frame gradually disappeared. One of the travelers quietly gasped. Another lowered his lantern, unable to look away. "That cannot be possible," he whispered. The oldest among them stepped closer, without taking his eyes from the silver light. No ordinary healing gift has looked like that for centuries. Evelyn barely heard him. Her attention remained fixed on the little wolf resting peacefully in her arms. The exhaustion that had clouded its bright eyes only moments earlier had almost completely vanished. It stretched its tiny legs, then looked up at her with joyful curiosity, before affectionately rubbing its head beneath her chin. Tears unexpectedly filled Evelyn's eyes. She had never cared whether anyone recognized her kindness, but seeing the little creature healthy again filled her heart with quiet happiness. Then another unexpected detail caught her attention. The moonstone hanging around the pup's neck was glowing as well. The delicate carvings she had noticed earlier were no longer faint. They shimmered with elegant silver symbols that slowly circled the polished stone, before fading into soft blue light. The oldest traveler inhaled sharply. "The royal crest," he murmured, almost to himself. His companions exchanged stunned looks, but remained respectfully silent. Evelyn looked up, confused. "Royal crest?" she asked. Before anyone answered, the tiny wolf unexpectedly climbed from her arms onto her shoulder with surprising confidence. It balanced there effortlessly, before looking toward the northern horizon. A clear, cheerful little howl escaped its throat. It was not loud. It carried no fear. Instead, it sounded almost like a child calling for someone it loved. The forest answered immediately. Far away, a deep, powerful howl rolled across the mountains. Then another followed. And another. They were not threatening. They were commanding, filled with strength unlike anything Evelyn had ever heard before. Every tree seemed to vibrate with their distant echoes. The three travelers immediately lowered their heads in silent respect. Evelyn felt a strange pressure in the air, ancient yet calm, as though the entire forest itself recognized the approaching presence. The tiny wolf's ears perked excitedly. Its tail wagged for the first time since Evelyn had found it beneath the fallen branch. It gave one happy bark, before looking back into her eyes with unmistakable trust. Evelyn smiled despite the growing mystery surrounding them. Whatever lay ahead, she knew only one thing with absolute certainty. This frightened little soul had chosen to believe in her, long before anyone else ever had. The powerful howls rolling across the mountains faded into a heavy silence that settled over the ancient forest like a living presence. None of the travelers moved. Even their breathing seemed measured, careful, almost reverent. Evelyn Carter stood quietly with the tiny white wolf balanced on her shoulder, unable to understand why every face around her had suddenly changed. The oldest traveler slowly lowered himself onto one knee. His companions immediately followed without hesitation. They were not kneeling before Evelyn. Their eyes remained fixed on the little wolf, whose golden gaze never left the dark tree line ahead. Then the forest parted. Riders emerged soundlessly between the towering pines, mounted on magnificent wolves, whose silver and black coats shimmered beneath the moonlight. Their armor reflected no unnecessary decoration, only elegant craftsmanship marked with the same royal emblem Evelyn had noticed hanging from the tiny wolf's neck. There were no shouted commands, no dramatic display of force. Their quiet discipline alone carried an authority unlike anything Evelyn had ever witnessed. One after another, nearly 24 royal guards entered the clearing, before stopping in perfect formation. Every single one lowered their head. The silence deepened. At the center of the formation walked a man dressed in a long black coat, trimmed with silver thread that caught the moonlight like frost across winter branches. He moved with calm confidence rather than intimidation, yet every step naturally drew the attention of everyone present. He appeared to be in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with neatly combed dark hair and striking silver eyes that reflected both quiet strength and profound exhaustion. His expression remained composed, but there was something deeper hidden beneath it, the unmistakable weariness of someone who had carried an unbearable burden for far too long. Evelyn did not know his name. She only knew she had never seen anyone whose presence could make an entire forest seem to stand still. The man's eyes searched the clearing with careful urgency, until they found the tiny wolf resting safely against Evelyn's shoulder. For the first time since he appeared, his composed expression faltered. Relief washed across his face so suddenly that it transformed him from an untouchable ruler into something far more familiar. A worried father. His shoulders relaxed ever so slightly, and he closed his eyes for one brief moment, as though silently thanking the moon itself. When he opened them again, they glistened with emotion he made no attempt to hide. The little wolf gave a joyful bark. Without fear, it leaped gently from Evelyn's shoulder, and ran across the soft forest floor. The man immediately knelt with open arms. The tiny pup bounded straight into his embrace, wagging its tail so enthusiastically that even several guards quietly smiled. The man carefully lifted the pup against his chest, and rested his forehead gently against the little wolf's head. "Rowan," he whispered, his voice steady despite the obvious relief it carried. "You frightened all of us." The pup answered with a happy whimper, before licking his cheek, completely at ease. Evelyn watched the tender moment with a warm smile, grateful the little wolf had found someone who clearly loved him. She had expected the strangers to simply reclaim a lost animal. Instead, she had witnessed the reunion of a family. After a quiet moment, the man slowly stood, while continuing to hold the pup securely. Rowan looked back toward Evelyn immediately, stretching one tiny paw toward her, as though unwilling to let the distance grow between them. The man followed his son's gaze, before meeting Evelyn's eyes for the first time. His silver gaze held neither suspicion nor pride. It carried only sincere gratitude, mixed with quiet curiosity. Before Evelyn could speak, every royal guard in the clearing bowed their heads once more. The oldest traveler stepped forward respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "Prince Rowan has been found safe because of this young woman." Evelyn's breath caught. She looked from the tiny wolf to the man holding him, then back again, as the impossible truth slowly settled into her heart. The little soul she had rescued beneath the fallen branch was no ordinary wolf pup, and the gentle father standing before her was none other than Alpha King Lucian Ashthorne, the most powerful ruler in all the Northern Territories. For several long seconds, Evelyn Carter could not find her voice. She stood beneath the towering pines, with cool autumn air brushing against her face, while countless questions rushed through her mind. The Alpha King himself was standing only a few yards away, holding the tiny wolf she had carried through the forest without realizing his true identity. Yet nothing about the scene matched the frightening stories whispered throughout the Northern Territories. The ruler before her looked neither cruel nor distant. He looked like a father whose greatest fear had finally been lifted from his heart. Prince Rowan gently wriggled from Lucian Ashthorne's arms, and trotted back toward Evelyn before anyone could stop him. The tiny prince sat happily beside her boots, looking up with bright golden eyes and wagging his fluffy tail, as though introducing her to the entire royal escort. A few guards exchanged surprised glances. One of the younger soldiers smiled despite himself. "His Highness rarely trusts strangers," he murmured quietly. "Especially this quickly." Lucian noticed it as well. His silver eyes followed Rowan's every movement, before returning to Evelyn. "May I ask your name?" he said, his voice calm and respectful. Evelyn quickly lowered her head. "My name is Evelyn Carter, Your Majesty." "Miss Carter," Lucian replied gently, "my son appears to have made an important decision tonight." Evelyn looked down at the cheerful little prince. Rowan responded by pressing himself affectionately against her leg, refusing to leave her side for more than a few moments. She laughed softly, unable to hide her affection. "He is very brave," she said. "He was frightened when I found him, but he never stopped trying to trust someone." Lucian's expression softened even further. "That sounds very much like Rowan." The oldest royal traveler stepped forward, carrying the silver lantern. "Your Majesty, we searched nearly every valley after the prince wandered beyond the northern ridge. We feared the storm had driven him farther into the wilderness than anyone could safely reach before nightfall." Lucian nodded thoughtfully, before looking toward Evelyn once more. "Then it seems destiny guided the one person willing to listen, when everyone else might have continued walking." Evelyn felt heat rise into her cheeks. "I only heard a frightened little cry. Anyone would have done the same." Several guards quietly lowered their eyes. No one answered. Their silence revealed a truth she had not expected. Perhaps not everyone would have stopped. Rowan suddenly stood on his hind legs, and placed both tiny paws against Evelyn's hands. His moonstone pendant shimmered once again beneath the silver moonlight. As soon as Evelyn instinctively touched the necklace to steady it, the delicate carvings across its surface glowed with the same gentle silver light that had surrounded Rowan earlier. A ripple of astonishment spread through the royal escort. Even Lucian's composed expression shifted. The oldest traveler slowly inhaled. "The Moonstone seal has awakened again." Another guard whispered, "It has not responded to anyone outside the royal bloodline since the late queen." Evelyn immediately withdrew her hands. "I am sorry. I did not mean to touch anything important." Lucian shook his head. "You have nothing to apologize for." He carefully knelt beside Rowan, studying the glowing pendant with quiet concentration. The ancient symbols shimmered for several more moments, before gradually fading back into polished silver. Rowan happily leaned against Evelyn again, as though nothing unusual had happened. Lucian remained thoughtful. "This heirloom was created generations ago," he said quietly. "It has always recognized those whose hearts seek to protect rather than possess. I have never seen it respond this way to someone outside my family." Evelyn looked genuinely confused. "I do not understand. I only wanted to help." Lucian slowly stood, his gaze warm, yet filled with growing curiosity. "That," he answered softly, "may be exactly why it chose to answer you." Above them, the full moon emerged from behind drifting clouds, bathing the clearing in pale silver light, as though the ancient forest itself had quietly witnessed the beginning of something none of them yet fully understood. The peaceful stillness surrounding the clearing lasted only a few moments, before the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the trees once again. This time, the voices were familiar. Lantern light flickered between the pines, as several wolves from Silver Hollow Pack emerged from the forest, led by Pack Alpha Dominic. His confident stride slowed the instant he noticed the royal escort standing in disciplined formation. The color drained from his face. Every member of his group immediately lowered their heads upon recognizing the silver crest of the Northern Throne. Dominic recovered quickly enough to offer a respectful bow. "Your Majesty," he said carefully. "We were searching these woods. After hearing unusual signals. We had no idea the royal family was here." Lucian Ashthorne acknowledged him with a calm nod, but said nothing. His attention remained on Prince Rowan, who was happily circling Evelyn Carter before stopping beside her once again. Dominic finally noticed the little wolf. His eyes widened with obvious surprise. "That animal belongs to the crown?" he asked. Before anyone answered, another member of Silver Hollow spoke eagerly. "Your Majesty, we have searched these woods for hours. Our pack has done everything possible to protect your territory." Several of the others quickly nodded in agreement, each trying to appear helpful. Evelyn quietly stepped back, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. She expected the royal escort to take Rowan home, and for the evening to quietly end. Instead, the tiny prince trotted after her once more, and gently leaned against her leg, refusing to leave her side. Dominic forced an awkward smile. "It seems the little prince has taken quite a liking to one of our pack members." Lucian's silver eyes settled calmly upon him. "One of your pack members?" Dominic straightened proudly. "Yes, Your Majesty. Silver Hollow teaches compassion to all who serve under my leadership." Several royal guards exchanged subtle glances, but remained respectfully silent. Evelyn lowered her eyes. She had no desire to embarrass anyone. She simply hoped everyone could return home peacefully. Then Prince Rowan did something that no one expected. The little wolf walked directly to Evelyn, stood on his hind legs, and gently placed both front paws into her hands. His moonstone pendant glowed once again beneath the moonlight. The prince looked toward his father, before letting out one cheerful bark, almost as though proudly introducing the woman who had cared for him. Lucian watched the scene quietly, before turning back toward Dominic. "Tell me," he asked in a composed voice, "who found my son?" The clearing became perfectly silent. Dominic hesitated for only a heartbeat before answering. "Our patrols covered these forests all evening. It was a team effort by Silver Hollow." Evelyn looked up in surprise, but remained silent. Before she could speak, the oldest royal traveler stepped forward. "With respect, Your Majesty, that is not what happened." Every eye shifted toward him. He bowed before continuing. "When we first arrived, Prince Rowan was already safe in Miss Evelyn Carter's care. She freed him, comforted him, and restored his strength before any of us reached this clearing. Another royal guard added quietly, "We witnessed everything ourselves." Dominic's confident expression faltered. Several members of Silver Hollow avoided looking at Evelyn altogether. Lucian slowly walked toward her, until only a few feet separated them. His voice remained calm, yet every word carried unmistakable authority. "Miss Carter, is there anything you wish to add?" Evelyn hesitated, before gently shaking her head. "No, Your Majesty. I only did what I hoped someone would do for any frightened child. That is all." Those simple words settled over the clearing more heavily than any speech could have. Lucian looked at her for a long moment, before turning toward the gathered wolves of Silver Hollow. "A person's true character is revealed when kindness is offered without expecting recognition," he said quietly. "Tonight, the only reward Miss Carter sought was knowing my son was safe." Prince Rowan gave another happy bark, before pressing himself against Evelyn's side once more, making his choice clearer than words ever could. For the first time in her life, the wolves who had overlooked Evelyn were forced to see her through the eyes of a king, and through the trusting heart of the child whose life she had quietly changed forever. No one spoke after Alpha King Lucian Ashthorn's words settled over the clearing. The silence felt different now. It was no longer filled with uncertainty, but with reflection. Even the wolves of Silver Hollow seemed unable to meet Evelyn Carter's eyes for very long. 4 years, they had measured strength by power, status, and influence. Yet the smallest act of compassion had accomplished what none of their authority had managed to do. Prince Rowan remained close beside Evelyn, his snowy tail brushing gently against her boots. Every few moments, he glanced toward his father, before happily returning his attention to the woman who had carried him through the forest without expecting anything in return. Lucian observed the quiet exchange with thoughtful eyes. "There is something all of you should understand," he finally said. His calm voice carried effortlessly through the clearing. "The moonstone seal worn by every royal heir is older than my throne, older than my family, perhaps older than the kingdoms themselves." The royal guards immediately straightened, listening with complete attention. Lucian continued, "It does not awaken because of power. It does not respond to titles. It recognizes a heart that protects life, without asking what that life can offer in return." Evelyn looked down in surprise. "Your Majesty, I truly did not know who Rowan was." Lucian smiled faintly. "That is precisely why the ancient magic answered you." The oldest royal traveler stepped forward with quiet reverence. "Our oldest records tell of only a handful of people beyond the royal bloodline who were ever acknowledged by the Moonstone. Each of them was remembered, not for greatness they pursued, but for kindness they never abandoned." A gentle breeze drifted through the towering pines, carrying silver leaves across the clearing. At that very moment, Rowan's moonstone shimmered once more. This time, the light spread softly around the little prince, before briefly surrounding Evelyn in a delicate silver glow that resembled thousands of tiny stars floating through the night air. The light lasted only a few seconds, before fading peacefully into the moonlit forest. No one moved. Several members of the royal escort quietly placed a hand over their heart in silent respect. Even Dominic lowered his head, recognizing that he had just witnessed something beyond ordinary understanding. Evelyn blinked in astonishment. "What was that?" she asked quietly. Lucian looked toward the ancient moon shining above the trees, before answering. "Sometimes the moon goddess reminds us that destiny does not always arrive wearing a crown. Sometimes it arrives disguised as a simple choice between walking away and stopping to help." Rowan happily nudged Evelyn's hand once again, earning a soft laugh from her. The little prince seemed completely unaware that everyone around him had just witnessed something extraordinary. To him, Evelyn was simply the kind woman who had answered his frightened cries when the forest had felt far too large. Lucian watched his son carefully, before turning back toward Evelyn. "For many years," he said, "Rowan has been cautious around people outside our household. Tonight, he trusted you before he trusted any of my soldiers. That alone tells me more than any report ever could." Evelyn smiled warmly at the little wolf. "Perhaps he was only lonely." "Perhaps," Lucian replied. "Or perhaps he recognized the kind of courage that cannot be taught through training." The Alpha King slowly extended one hand toward Evelyn, not as a command, but as an invitation offered with genuine respect. Miss Carter, if you are willing, I would like you to visit the royal palace as an honored guest. There are questions about tonight that deserve answers, and I believe the future has quietly begun writing a story that neither of us expected beneath this moonlit sky. For a long moment, Evelyn Carter simply looked at the Alpha King's outstretched hand. Never in her life had she imagined that a single evening could carry her from standing alone outside a celebration to being invited into the royal palace itself. She glanced down at Prince Rowan, who answered with an excited little bark, before gently placing one tin